Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our Instagram Live tonight.
How's it going?
We're happy to be here. Let's jump in.
Okay.
Not waste any time.
Yeah, okay. So we're talking about, the title of today's is When Faith Meets Doubt, and why that's okay. So we're going to talk about faith and belief and doubt, and the good and the bad and the ugly of those things. So maybe to start things out, want to talk about the basic, not necessarily the definition of faith, but how we often talk about faith, which is faith being a set of beliefs. And that's a fine definition. Your faith is the things that you believe in. That's great, but I think it can be more than that. Do you want to jump in there?
Well, I'm thinking through like other times we use the word faith, and I think of when people are talking about their religion, like my faith tradition, my faith, whatever is, this is my faith, and so that makes sense that it is a set of beliefs. And so how would you differentiate with belief then? What is belief versus faith? Because those are also separate.
Yeah, so the way I'm thinking about this, belief here is agreeing to something. It is intellectual assent that a certain thing is true. So I can say to you, I believe that peanut M&Ms are better than regular M&Ms. Because they are. I just happen to have a gigantic thing of peanut M&Ms.
And I don't agree with
which
your
I will be
belief.
Second. But the point of it is that belief, right, that intellectual assertion does not get me anywhere. That's not a principle of action. That's not a principle of power. Now, I can make this a little closer to home, which is I can believe that Jesus Christ appeared to Joseph Smith and Oliver Cowdery in the Kirtland Temple. To pick like a really specific thing, right? I can believe that thing happened. And that, again, does not necessarily give me spiritual strength. That does not make me grow in a spiritual way in my relationship with God. So you can have beliefs. I think you can believe that Jesus Christ was born in Nazareth. I think you can believe that Joseph Smith restored the church in these latter days and still not have a robust faith. So that's starting with belief there. Yeah. You want to add to that?
Well, we all have to find things that we believe in. And I think that, those things can be different for different people. They're going to mean different things. It's going to, everybody's going to hold on to different beliefs. And let's just get this out of the gate. I think it's really important as we go through life in a mature way to realize that maybe some of our beliefs may not be true.
Okay. All right.
Across the board, we don't like to talk about the fact that possibly our religious beliefs are not true. We want to hold on to those really tightly.
Usually talking about like individual beliefs.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Not necessarily them all as a whole.
Right. But I think it's really important I think it's very mature of a person, very, deep thinker, critical thinker, to realize that their beliefs may be wrong. And I think that's often how you go into conversations with people, how we should go into conversations with people, with this understanding that maybe I need to learn something, maybe I don't understand something, and you're going in with curiosity and with an open mind. And so I think it's really interesting moving that into a religious context of how do we deal with our beliefs? Do we hold on tightly to them and they never can falter, they never can move, and we are just stuck on it? Or is there room for growth and new knowledge and, a progression of our beliefs?
I love that. And to build on that, sometimes we have this idea in the church that if you believe the right things, that's the end. That's living the gospel. But we also believe in these things like eternal progression and this concept of spiritual growth that goes beyond this life, that has a lot more to it. There's a lot more meat on the bone than just, I've read through the Articles of Faith and looks good. I think I'm celestial material at that point, sort of a thing.
Well, and there are a lot of other religions that say, that once they believe, once they claim that Christ has saved them, then they're good to go, and so it's a
Sure.
similar thing, that you just have to make this declaration of your belief, of your desire to follow or whatever it is, and then you feel like you're golden. You don't have to do the work anymore, and
Right.
that doesn't always pan out that way.
So if that's the belief side, let's talk about faith. And if faith is more than just belief, what is faith? Now, a really common place to start here is to go to the Greek in the Old Testament, behind the word that gets translated as faith a whole bunch of times, a couple of hundred times in the New Testament. The word is pistis. I don't know if I'm saying that right. I'm not a Greek scholar, but it shows up a couple hundred times, especially concentrated in a few places. Paul uses it a lot. It shows up in Romans and Galatians especially quite a bit. And it gets translated most of the time as faith. But scholars agree that there's some nuance to that word. It means faith, but it also means trust, or even confidence, or even trustworthiness, or faithfulness, which is more like a fidelity kind of concept here. And so it's not that it's mistranslated in the New Testament, it's that faith has multiple definitions in English, right? And so faith can mean beliefs, but it can also mean trust. And what I'm talking about here is trust in God.
Yeah, and I really love that definition of faith, because for me, when I think of trust, it really leads me to action.
Right.
And I think that's where we take our faith in something, and in God, in our heavenly parents, and that encourages us, or builds a desire in us to do things, to follow, to keep the commandments,
Right.
to live a righteous life, and those are a lot of those are going to be personal and defined by us, of what we think a religious life is, what we, how we obey the commandments. There are certain guidelines and rules and everything that are, we're supposed to follow.
Sure.
But religion, spirituality is all very personal.
Right.
It should be.
And the essence of this this understanding of faith, this trust or confidence, is that it's relational. So instead of our faith being in a thing or a belief, it's in somebody. It's in God, a real living God. And how can we trust, how can we have confidence in God unless we have a relationship with God? Mm-hmm. And this turns faith into a much bigger thing, right? It's this thing that drives us to action. It's this thing that has power. If we trust God, if we trust that that the things that Jesus has taught are the right things, and that we will be blessed, what does that mean for us? When we trust, when Jesus Christ says you need to love God and love your neighbor, what are we going to do because of that? That's what this definition of faith is about.
Yeah, I love this quote from Martin Luther King Jr. He says, "Faith is taking the first step even when you don't see the whole staircase." And I think that's a lot of what we're talking about, is when we have faith in heavenly parents, in Jesus Christ, we don't see them. We don't have, personal assurity or certainty. And so we don't see the whole staircase, but we take that step. It's an action. It's doing something with that. And so, like you're saying, we don't, when we hear love God and love your neighbor, we don't just say, yep, check, I do those things, but we have to actually do things,
right,
to show that we love, to build on that love, I guess.
Well, I'm struck how often in the scriptures faith gets described as hoping for something. In Hebrews 11:1, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. And then in Alma 32 again, faith is not to have a perfect knowledge of things. Therefore, if ye have faith, ye hope for things. Which again, this is the relational part of it. This is a trust. This is a confidence. This is not believing something and saying, yeah, I know this. I've got this checked off my list.
It's no longer faith at that point.
Right. It's an intellectual exercise.
Yeah.
At that point. So here's where I want to go with this. We've kind of designated the belief side of things and the faith side of things, and I want to talk about where doubt comes in. So if your definition of faith is only holding certain beliefs, then if you have doubts, it's devastating to that faith. It's the absence of that faith, right? And that's often how we talk about doubt is, oh, your faith is gone.
Yeah.
You have the absence of faith there.
Yeah, you're failing in your religious life. And
absolutely.
Yeah.
But if faith is trust in God, and you start to have doubts about some of your beliefs, there's not really a problem anymore. Because the beliefs aren't the important part here. The important part is your relationship with God. It's the trust that you have in God. And I think that's super cool.
Yeah. I as you were talking, and maybe this is a tangent, but I was thinking about our articles of faith.
Sure.
It's interesting that it is called that because I recently rewrote the articles of faith to be personal, to be my own articles of faith.
Yeah.
And as I was writing them, I kept calling it my declaration of belief because it seemed different than faith. And I don't know why. I guess I don't know the history of why it's called an article of faith instead of declarations of belief or tenets of belief or, whatever. But I think that is really interesting because we can believe those things that are in the articles of faith. We can believe in them. We can work to learn and understand them, but we have to have faith that they are true, that they're going to come to pass.
Okay.
That there's something more to them than just the words that we repeat and learn to sing as kids.
There's got to be life behind them.
Right. And so for me, that's why when I rewrote my declarations of belief, that was really meaningful because it was everything that I do. It is that those things that I wrote are really embodied in who I am as a person. And so it was really easy to say these are my beliefs and they are possible because of my faith in my heavenly parents. And so it's kind of my outward action in, what I internally believe. So I don't know. It's interesting to think about the articles of faith that way.
Yeah, I love that. There's a comment in the chat. And by the way, would love to hear your thoughts in the chat. Faith is a super personal thing. Would love to hear your perspective on it. But referencing the verse where the man brings his ailing son to Jesus to be healed, and Jesus said, well, this can happen if you believe. And he says, I believe, help me, my unbelief.
Yeah.
And that's actually that same word that we were talking about in the Greek. It's a different form of it. It's apistia, I think, for unbelief there. But again, it's that trust and confidence. Because what's happening there is the Father is not saying, well, I had this set of beliefs and one of them failed or these sorts of things. But he is actually in the moment. He's standing in front of Jesus thinking, can he heal my son?
Yeah.
Can this actually happen?
Yeah. I feel like I have this amount of belief, but I know I need to be up here. You got to cover the rest of it. And that is what our Savior is for, to cover that ground. There's a couple comments over here as well. Understanding the temple is exactly what we're talking about. We have to have a lot of faith in that because,
it's a lot of trust.
Yeah, there's a lot of trust that goes into it. Just like Indiana Jones and the Invisible Bridge that was brought up in these comments. And yeah, I love this, that you can trust God even amidst the doubts. And it's so that I feel like that's life-changing to understand that we can really have our doubts and it's okay. We're going to be okay because our faith is in our heavenly parents. Our faith is rooted where it's supposed to be rooted.
Right.
And, and so when everything else happens, all the messy parts of humanity, we're not going to just blow away because we are rooted in something.
Right. Thanks, Kenny, who put that in the chat. I love that about trust amidst the doubts. And it reminds me of this quote over here from Rob Bell. If you know the Robcast, Rob Bell is really terrific. And he says, for many people in our world, the opposite of faith is doubt. First of all, totally relate to that.
Yeah.
I think we do that a lot in the church. He says, the goal then within this understanding is to eliminate doubt. But faith and doubt aren't opposites. Doubt is often a sign that your faith has a pulse, that it's alive and well and exploring and searching. Faith and doubt aren't opposites. They are, it turns out, excellent dance partners.
So cool.
It's so good. And the implication here that doubt is something that makes your faith stronger is a little bit mind-blowing at first.
Yeah.
Like, this is hard to get our minds around if we think the opposite of faith is doubt.
Right. Well, and I mean, there's that famous Uchtdorf quote of doubt your doubts before you doubt your faith, your belief. What is it?
Doubt your faith. Yeah, you have
Your
it first
faith.
time.
Yeah. And that really is putting faith and doubt as opposites. Doubt.
Well, and I think part of that is that quote comes out of context. Sorry, were you going to say this?
No, go ahead.
Because he also says in that talk, it's okay to have doubts. And
Yeah.
so I think we tend to grab that little quotable
Yeah.
bit there, and it makes it sound like doubts aren't okay. That's not what he's saying.
Yeah. I also want to read this quote from Ram Dass.
Yeah.
It says, faith is not a belief. Faith is what is left when your beliefs have all been blown to hell. Faith is in the heart while beliefs are in the head. Experiences, even spiritual experiences, come and go. As long as you base your faith on experience, your faith is going to be constantly flickering because your experiences keep changing.
Oh, that's so good.
Isn't that great? I love this, like, faith is what's left when everything else goes away because we have our faith rooted in God and Jesus. But I love that if we put our faith on experiences, it's what you were talking about with this relational bit. If it's on
Right.
the experiences, that's not relational. That could be transactional. It's
Okay.
something different. But when we have our faith in heavenly parents, that is strong. That's going to get us through when everything else has been blown to hell, as it says.
That's something you can keep going back to.
Yeah, you can rely on that
Yeah.
as you work through your doubts and all of that.
Yeah, I love that. Now, if you're familiar with faith stages models, like Fowler or Brian McLaren's, Brian McLaren's a simpler one, and we often talk about that stage 3, which is perplexity, which is kind of where doubt enters the picture. Now, when I first learned about faith stage models, the reason it was so important to me was that it made room for having doubts. And it pointed out, like, hey, this is okay. This is a legitimate stage of faith that you can be in. Mm-hmm. Having doubt and having kind of live and active doubt. And the implication that in some ways, and I want to be careful saying this, but in some ways that's a faith that has matured quite a bit. And so I have a little bit from Jana Spangler here. Jana did the Living School with Richard Rohr, the Center for
Action and Contemplation.
Thanks. Spaced it right in the moment. And that's where Brian McLaren is kind of running the show now. But she distinguishes between a belief crisis versus a faith crisis. And I kind of like that. Again, that's making that same distinction that we were making earlier. And she talks about lots of times when people are in this stage 3 perplexity, their beliefs are being challenged. But I love this call out. She says, in this stage where you're having these doubts and your beliefs are being challenged, these people, they are actually having to exercise a deeper faith than they ever have in their life because no one is showing them, here's the next step. They have to really dig down deep and find something in themselves that still believes in goodness and that there's something in life for them and that there's a way through and that they can still be held through it.
Yeah.
And so this idea that when you have doubts, you have to have stronger faith because your beliefs have been blown away. Yeah.
I think this works perfectly with this comment on your account that says, it brings up this idea or scripture when Christ was in the Garden of Gethsemane and he says, if it's possible for this cup to pass from me, please let it be so. I think that's what that is showing is that he is exercising a deeper faith because things got really hard for him. Right. He was literally suffering for all of us. And so he had to pull from that deeper faith. And I don't think it's
Yeah.
like Rob J. R. Job, whatever that is, not suggesting that Christ doubted, but he was going through something and had to, pull in that deep, strong faith in who he was, who his parents were, to get him through that thing. And so I think that's really beautiful to think that when we are struggling, I think people who struggle often get the short end of the stick from those around them, that they're giving up on things, they're lazy learners, they're ignoring,
a failure in some way.
They're ignoring the Spirit, whatever it is. But being in a position that is similar to that, going through a lot of things and having to relearn and figure things out for myself, I can tell you 100% that I am working out and calling on my heavenly parents more than I ever have. And that relationship is very different looking than it was in the past, but it is strong still.
Yeah.
And so, there's nothing lazy about this. There's nothing wrong with this, but it is hard work to try and figure out, once everything crumbles, once everything has blown to hell, how do you rebuild it? How do you get back into that? And man, it's tough.
It really is. And a comment in the chat about an engaged faith versus a passive faith. That's absolutely right on. And I even think we see that in some people that leave the church, which is a little bit counterintuitive. But they've had some beliefs that have been blown away. Does that mean they don't have a relationship with God? It absolutely does not. In fact, that relationship with God may be stronger than it's ever been. Now, we hope they'll come back to the church. I believe this is the Church of Jesus Christ and all the implications of that. But even if they don't, it doesn't mean that their faith has failed. It doesn't mean there's no faith there. Some beliefs have been blown away, but that faith, that trust in God and that relationship with God may very well still be there, and it may be stronger than it's ever been.
Yeah, and there may be some people that hear this and think, well, I know people that left the church and have completely left.
Sure, absolutely.
So maybe their faith is in something different. I struggle to think of a single person who doesn't have faith in something greater than themselves. And it doesn't have to be a religious context. And so I want to just make sure that we're not pushing people that have left the church and don't believe, don't hold any religious tenets anymore. We're not trying to chastise them or say that they did it wrong and only the people that left the church but still believe in God are doing it right. That's not what we're trying to say.
Yeah, not at all.
Yeah.
And sometimes there's other terminology that's a little bit more helpful. Especially when faith, we can be defining this other ways. I'm going to go to Nadia Bowles-Weber on this one.
She's the best.
We're super excited we get to go see her. She's coming to Salt Lake City in a week and a half.
On Mother's Day. If you want to find out more about that, send us a DM because it's going to be great.
I heard there's still tickets. If you're in Utah, come hang out with us and Nadia, which would be amazing. But she says this. She says, I guess I just no longer think of faith as intellectually assenting to theological propositions, or as regularly confirming in myself that I believe all the wildest stories in the Bible are literally, factually, historically accurate. And this is the money line here. Faith functions in my life as something closer to gravity than ideology. And I love that visual of gravity.
Yeah.
It's
the deeper faith
that
Jenna was talking about.
Who or what or where are you drawn to on a deeper level? And I think that's very akin to what we've been talking about a relationship with God and a closeness and a trust with God. I think of that at the same thing. But if it makes more sense to you to call it gravity, or if God is a concept that's a little too ethereal at the moment, then maybe think about it as gravity. James Fowler talks about it as an orientation, which is a really kind of clinical sounding word. But when you think about being oriented a certain way, it's where are you pointed? And I actually really like that visual too. Maybe there's a less clinical word for that.
Yeah.
But like, which way are you facing? Where are you pointed?
Yeah.
And that's close to this concept of faith for sure.
Yeah. We're kind of wrapping up, but I want to share this quote from Orson Scott Card. And it's probably from one of his books. I didn't look it up. Okay. Sorry. But it says, faith is not to blindly believe. Faith is action. It's doing something. It's creating what we need and believing that God will be merciful enough to grant it in his time, in their time. I'm going to change the quote. Yeah, but I think this kind of pulls us back to the beginning of faith being an action word. There's a scripture about faith without works is dead. Sure. And I want to make sure that we don't, as Susan and Cynthia on that last, she said it, we don't want to be on this hamster wheel of works, that we can never get off, and or the treadmill of works. Like there's lots of ways to think of that concept. Because I think that grace is going to play a huge part in the work side of things, but our faith leads us to do things, and it's not just blindly believing, but it is choosing. It's an action to believe in something, and then go forward and do something about it. Yeah, so kind of recapping, we talked about belief. I think belief is often the starting point, maybe, is saying like, yes, I agree to these, theological tenets of the church, or that sort of a thing. But faith being trust in God, like the Greek in the New Testament really implies that this is a relational thing. This is about trust in God. And again, once we think about faith in that way, then doubts take on a whole new flavor. And doubts become something that's not only acceptable, but something that helps us to develop and grow our faith, that trust, and make it even stronger. And I think that's not something that we really talk about in the church, but it's such a powerful concept. Yeah. So here's a little assignment for everybody listening. All right.
I'm watching everybody drop off.
I know, right? no homework. The next time you're reading in the Bible or the Book of Mormon or Doctrine and Covenants, wherever you're reading, every time it says faith, put in the word trust and see how it changes the scripture.
It might not change every time, but sometimes it might change really meaningfully.
Right. It might give you insight into the scriptures that you just hadn't been aware of before. And so I think that would be really interesting. I'm going to do that.
Yeah, I'm going to do that too. All right. Well, thanks so much, everybody. Really loved the robust conversation in the comments. Thank you so much for joining and being a part of this and participating in the conversation. We'll be back next week, I assume.
Yeah, and we'll post some reels from this, at least one maybe this week. So stay tuned for that and comment on that, and let's keep the conversation going.
All right. Thanks, guys. See you later.
Bye.